This is part two of my soon-to-be published book, Becoming You, called Listening to Yourself. So in the last video, I asked you a question: how well do you actually know yourself? And I suggested that for most of us, if we were honest, the answer is not as well as we think. That video was about getting to know yourself. This video goes one step further, because there is a difference between knowing yourself and actually hearing yourself. And that difference changes everything. Let me ask you something else. When was the last time you genuinely listened to yourself? Not scrolled past a feeling because there was too much else to do, not overridden an instinct because someone else seemed more certain, not dismissed an emotion because it felt inconvenient or excessive or hard to explain. When did you last actually stop, turn inward and listen to what was there? For most people, the usual answer is a long time ago. And here's what I think is important to understand about that. Most people do not ignore themselves because they do not care. They perhaps ignore themselves because nobody ever taught them how to listen. Before you can express yourself, you have to be able to hear yourself. And what I've discovered through many years of working with clients in therapy is that the ability to hear your own inner world is not something most of us develop naturally. It's a skill. And like any skill, it can be learned, it can be practiced, and it can be deepened over time. And this is what I call self-attunement. Not simply observing yourself from the outside, noticing your patterns and your behaviors the way you might observe someone else, but actually turning into your own inner experience. The way a good parent tunes in to their child, noticing what is being communicated, even when it is not being said with words. Most of us learned very early on to listen outward rather than inward. Perhaps when you were young, your feelings were interrupted, dismissed, perhaps they were minimized, perhaps there was not anyone emotionally available enough to hear them in the way that you naturally needed. And gradually over time, without any conscious decision being made, you learned to stop asking what you were feeling and start asking instead what other people needed from you. Listening moved outwards and it stayed there. The result for many people is an inner world that has been trying to get their attention for years, through anxiety, through sadness, through the experience of exhaustion, through that persistent sense that something is not quite right, even when life looks perfectly fine from the outside. These are not problems to be solved. They are messages. And this video is about learning to receive them. And I want to introduce you to something here because it will help you understand everything that follows in this series make more sense. In my work, I use a deeper model called the filial psyche. It describes three parts to yourself that are always communicating whether or not you are listening. There is the inner child. This part does not speak in words. It speaks in feelings, sensations, experiences, the sudden tightness in your chest, that sadness that arrives without a clear reason, the anxiety before something that should, by most measures, feel fine. These are not random. They are communication. Then there is the inner critic. This part speaks through beliefs, through the familiar voice that tells you that you're not good enough, thoughts that you are too much, that you will get it wrong. Most of us has become very practiced at hearing this voice. In fact, many people hear nothing else. And then there is the inner nurturing parent. This is the wise, steady, compassionate part of you that has the capacity to hold everything else with care. And here is the reality that this entire video is really about. Most people only hear the inner critic. They've forgotten how to hear their inner child. And they have never quite learned to access the nurturing parent at all. I want to say something about feelings that I think is genuinely important. A feeling is not a problem, it is information. Sadness does not arrive randomly. It says something mattered. Fear does not arrive irrationally. It says something feels unsafe. And anger is not simply an overreaction. It also says a boundary may have been crossed. And shame, that really negative emotion, says an old belief has been activated. Loneliness says connection is needed. Every single emotion is a message from the part of you that knows deep down something your thinking mind has not yet caught up with. And the response that most of us have been trained to give to those messages is to make them stop as quickly as possible. We distract ourselves, we get super busy, we reach for the phone, we reach for food, we reach for a drink, or the next task on our to-do list. Not because we are weak, but because that is what many of us learn to do with our uncomfortable feelings. We manage them away rather than listening to what they were trying to say. Imagine a child coming to you, clearly frightened, clearly in need of something. And instead of listening, you simply said, "Stop that, there's nothing to worry about." That is not listening. And yet it is precisely how most of us respond to our own inner experience. We silence it before we've even heard it. Listening always has to come before any solutions. Not because the solutions do not matter, but because a solution offered before the feeling has been heard rarely lands in the way it was intended. What changes everything is the willingness to simply pause, to turn towards rather than away, to ask with genuine curiosity, what is this feeling, this emotion trying to tell me? There is a distinction I want to make here that I think is worth carrying with you. Listening to yourself does not mean obeying every feeling you have. You might feel angry. That does not mean you have to act from anger. You might feel frightened. That does not mean you have to let fear decide. Listening simply means acknowledging what is there, saying quietly and without judgment, "I hear you," and then allowing the wiser, steadier part of yourself to decide what to do next. That is the beginning of what I call the inner conversation. And it is one of the most important conversations you will ever learn to have. And I want to leave you with something simple and practical that you can begin today. 3 times during your day, I want you to pause just for a moment and ask yourself 3 questions. What am I feeling right now? What do I need? What would be kind? Not fixing, not judging, just listening. You might be surprised by what you hear when you finally give yourself permission to listen. The strongest relationships in life are not built on having all the answers. They are built on feeling heard. And perhaps your inner world has been trying to get your attention for a very long time. Perhaps the anxiety, the sadness, the restlessness, the exhaustion have all been trying to tell you something really important. Maybe it's time to listen. Because the moment you truly begin listening to yourself, something significant changes. You stop feeling alone inside your own life. In the next video, we explore what happens when listening begins to deepen into something even more important, and that is learning to trust yourself again. And I hope you will join me for that. I will see you then.